Hello, Uprisers! Today's video is something I have been wanting to share with you for so long now. It was my first time ever moderating a panel and on a pretty huge platform. You may or may not have heard of them. TikTok. Like I mentioned, this was my first time ever moderating a panel, and to be honest, I was scared shitless. I spent hours prepping for this because I wanted to feel as prepared as possible. Keep in mind, it was during the same time that my team and I were launching our collection at Complexland 2.0. So the timing couldn't be any better, but I didn't want to pass on this opportunity. When it rains, it pours, right? With very little sleep over those couple of weeks, I learned a lot from this experience, and today I will be sharing my learnings and key takeaways that I hope will help prep you for your next speaking engagement. Before we begin, I'm Michelle. I'm the founder and creative director for We Are Uprisers, a community-driven streetwear brand rooted in telling stories of the underrepresented. You will oftentimes find us collaborating and working with activists, trendsetters, people who we call warriors of change to mobilize and transform our communities. I also run an organization called Hate is a Virus with my co-founder Tammy Cho, a nonprofit and community of mobilizers and amplifiers dedicated to dismantling racism and all forms of hate. So let's get right into it. Here are 5 key areas I want to share with you based on my experience from moderating TikTok's Leading with Purpose discussion. Number 1, prep. I'm going to break this down into 2 main points, 1A and 1B. 1A, understand who your audience and guests are. This is really important because if a company or brand is bringing you on as a moderator, ask them questions to better understand the purpose of the panel and their goals they want to achieve. For this particular panel, it was on the TikTok for Business arm and catered towards the LinkedIn audience. This told me immediately that this wasn't catered towards creators. It's more for business-minded folks, some who may be working for companies and trying to better understand how they can take their initiatives to be more purpose-driven, or even founders, leaders themselves who are looking to get into a purpose brand or already practicing it today. It is also important to then know who your guests are, getting as much information about them, their role within the company, and about the company they represent. This will better prep you for point 3 I will share later in this video. 1B, prep your intro and outro. They are important and should feel and sound as authentic as possible. This is probably the only time during the discussion where people who don't know who you are will get a better sense as to what you do and why you were chosen to moderate the panel. In as few sentences as possible, prepare what you are going to say. The last thing we want to do is go on and on about you when the main focus should be on the panelists. After that, it's also a good idea to set the precedent for the discussion's topic. Outline points you want to hit and to give the audience who is listening a clear understanding of what they will be hearing about. Here's what my intro sounded like.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's purpose-driven discussion hosted by TikTok. I am very excited and honored to be moderating this conversation. This is a topic that I'm very passionate about. Before we get into this, I do want to introduce myself. My name is Michelle K. Hanabusa, pronouns she, her, hers. I am a 4th generation Japanese Okinawan American dreamer and entrepreneur. I currently run 2 different organizations, the first one being We Are Uprisers, which is a community-driven streetwear brand that is rooted in telling stories of the underrepresented within our communities. You will find us collaborating with activists, trendsetters, people who we call warriors of change in order to transform and mobilize our communities. I also am a co-founder of a nonprofit called Hate is a Virus, which is dedicated to dismantling racism and other forms of hate. As you know, or as some of us are in this business, doing business today looks a lot different than it did before. today's generation is more socially aware, and consumers really have found a way to utilize their power and their voice to affect change for not only themselves, but for culture and for the future. This puts us in a pivotal moment, right? And for us brands, it kind of creates a unique opportunity for us to start off with a core purpose, and if not, finding purpose along the way. And so I'm very excited to be chatting with 3 incredible brands today to talk about how they've used TikTok to connect with community, affect and inspire, and build positive change.
For the outro, keep it as simple and short as possible. Be sure to close out with last remaining thoughts from the conversation being had during the panel. Thank all the guests, the company or brand who brought the conversation to life, in this case, TikTok, and any CTA if possible. This is what I said during my outro.
Much for sharing all of that. Catherine, I think something that you said a little bit earlier today was just this intergenerational content. And I think that really spoke to me as well. I think it's so important to continuously have these conversations, not only with the new generation, but then also speak to the voices who have, come before us and just in the activism world, right? When we're talking about impact and purpose, folks have been doing this work for so many decades. And I think it is really, really important for us to not only pay homage, but there are reasons why we're standing here talking about these things, having these conversations because of the work that they have been doing for so long. So anyways, that brings our discussion to a close. I do want to thank each and every one of you, Gayatri, Catherine, Brad, Brian, for sharing your unique experiences, but also insights and best practices on how purpose-driven brands can really create change. I also want to thank the TikTok team for hosting this event and for those of you who are tuning in today. Until next time.
Number 2, define and list the main points you want to hit throughout the panel. This is a good exercise to go over with a company or brand who hired you to moderate. That way, you can better navigate and redirect a conversation that's happening live. It's important to allow panelists to riff off each other, and it's okay if a convo goes slightly off track, but then it's the responsibility for the moderator to smoothly bring it back on track. For this discussion, we defined 4 main points. 1, leading with purpose. 2, TikTok community. 3, active change through co-creation and addressing current events. 4, business impact. Number 3, jot down circle back questions. As I mentioned before in 1A, knowing your audience and guests, as well as point 2 about defining the main purpose and discussion you want to have. It's important to prepare questions that will help focus in on key points you want your panelists to hit if they are starting to steer away. Sometimes it can be as simple as rephrasing an existing question you already asked, or possibly asking panelists to dive a little bit deeper. Some alternative questions that I prepared for myself for this particular discussion includes the following. 1, so great that the community is so responsive. 2, I love that statement and would love to dive a little bit deeper on how you tackle or address that. A friendly tip for this is use ands versus buts, because it feels more like a conversation add-on instead of buts, which can sometimes sound negative. For example, I love that statement, but would love to, versus I love that statement and would love to dive deeper into how you tackle or address that. And then lastly, that's true, or I really resonate with what you just said there. A tip for this one is agreeing to the previous statement that the panelist had talked about. This allows you to address what they just said and can also segue into a more specific question you want to ask. Number 4, listen and learn from your community. I believe that in anything that we do in life, it's a good idea to be open and to also learn from reviews and feedback. Sometimes it's hard to do this because it's not always positive, but if you want to get better, it's important to not have your ego get in the way or to take it too personally. On that note, it's also good to acknowledge positive feedback you receive so that you have a better understanding of what resonated with folks and also find ways to repeat those aspects again for a future talk. For this particular discussion, I was pleased to see someone share their takeaway. She even created her own video and posted and tagged us via LinkedIn. Thank you, Bernice, for sharing your takeaway with us and your community. You can find the link to that takeaway and feedback down below in the description. Lastly, number 5. Take note on areas to improve for the future. 1. Lighting. We unfortunately didn't get the ring light in time for the conversation, but I think something to note for myself is that knowing that the recording was going to be in the morning, I quickly realized that sun that was cascading through my apartment was not the best lighting during that time of day. And so something that I want to do in the future is to make sure I know what time we are doing the live and to adjust my positioning or framing accordingly. Another takeaway for myself is owning the space. Taking authority in the fact that, I know what I'm talking about when it comes to leading with purpose. That is something that I do within my work on a day-to-day. And so as I continue to improve my speaking skills as well as moderating for future panels, I want to make sure that I sound and feel confident. I want to feel comfortable and also make sure that the panelists who I am talking to feel comfortable as well. And so those were some of my takeaways where I can improve for the future. I hope these takeaways were helpful, and since I'm still digesting and learning from my first time moderating on this scale, would love to hear from you any tips and tricks you have up your sleeve that worked for you. You can find the recap of the actual discussion down below and a great resource article TikTok posted from this discussion. That's it for today, and I'll see you next week, Uprisers. Let's continue to fight the good fight.